Me once again. Last video, we've gone through the process. Most of the stages of development, infancy up through early adulthood. Then, as you know, we skipped middle adulthood. Uh, Middle adulthood's important, but the changes that really take place, um, I think early and late adulthood actually or a more changeable time. Middle adulthood is like, it depends on your personality and some other things. And I'd get a lot of arguments, I'm sure, from developmental psychologists who would say, hey, it's just as important as the others. In terms of importance, it's that stage of development is important. It is important. But I just really like to concentrate on early and late because early you're getting there as in middle adulthood. Most of the time you're settled in middle adulthood. So you build into that, and then after that, you changes that become the end of life. And that's what we're going to talk about. Sounds depressing. It's really not. It's very interesting. Many of you, if not everybody here, has dealt with death in one way or another, sometimes tragic, sometimes normal, whatever the case is. So this is just a general discussion. We're not going to get that specific. So let's look at this thing. Let's look at perceptions. And you don't really much think about death in childhood. You may, depends on what's happened in your life. But in general, death is a remote thing. And it's in adolescence even. It's a remote consideration. Uh, it's lurking, but it's not your focal point. If you're, I hate to use the term normal, but I don't like that word. But I kind of think you get the idea. Now, as you enter into adulthood, then you become more aware, you become more conscious of the aspect of death. Again, if you are average, and this is another dangerous word, but if you are average, then most likely you know it's there. It's lurking, but it's not entirely your day-to-day focus, unless of course there's something wrong, disease or whatever. But when you enter older adulthood, you become aware of the inevitability of the end of life. Uh, and people, even then, it's sometimes hard for a person to come to grips with that. I, I'm trying to think of simplistic terms to make it mean something to you. I guess really the word would be reality. Adolescence and adulthood, uh, up to late adulthood, everybody dies, period. But the reality of it doesn't really necessarily set um, in a significant way until you're old and you start seeing your age approaching the average age of life. For example, you're 55 and you're a male. You know that the average age of length of life is about 76, 75 to 77 years, somewhere in there. It doesn't mean everybody all of a sudden, when they turn 75 and a half, they drop dead. Of course, it doesn't mean that. But the average, the big word average, and the reality begins to set in. So you get a different perspective of this stuff, this occurrence that you're going to have to deal with it at some point. Now, you've heard of Kubler-Ross, probably, maybe, um, in terms of the work done, theoretical work done in development? Well, there's a thing called the Kubler-Ross stages of dying. And here's how it works, even in old age. For some, this is established obviously through pretty in-depth research. Okay, so let's go through this. Denial and isolation. A person denies that death is going to take place. That's not an old age thing. That's a younger age thing. But let me caution you, even some old people, okay, so you're 80, well, I'm probably still going to live to 105. It's still a denial kind of thing. The next one is anger. And that's recognition that denial can no longer be maintained. And it gives way to anger, resentment, rage, and envy. Why me? Now, we're not talking, this is strange because we're not talking about somebody with a terminal disease here. We're talking about many people who know that part of living is dying. And they still may go through that particular stage. The first two, denial and isolation. And then why me? Well, why not you? You're a human being. But that's not what you would say to a client. If you were a counselor, you would talk about the realities of, you know what, you can't change it. And then you enter into the bargaining part of this. Hope that death can be postponed or delayed. So you've accepted the fact that, okay, it's going to happen, but can we do something to postpone it? Better treatment for whatever a disease is, or exercise, or whatever the case is, different eating habits. In other words, people are fighting it off. And then depression sets in. The acceptance of certainty can lead to preparatory grief. So the grieving starts before the death. And then finally, for people who are dealing with this properly, acceptance. And once they reach that stage, they have a sense of peace. I know of a lady who was given last year a diagnosis of stage 4 lung cancer that had now spread into her liver, and went through the chemo and all these things. And they told her, look, you're not going to make it. It's not going to happen. If you stay in treatment, you probably have a year to live, but the quality of your life is going to be pretty bad because of all this chemo, radiation, etc. Or you can suspend the treatment. Your quality of life will be better, but the length is going to shorten by 4 or 5 months. She chose the latter. And once she did that, she suddenly developed this sense of peace. She's good to go. I was in her presence yesterday, and you would never ever think that she knew that she was on her last few months of life. She's peppy, spunky, funny. It's amazing how she has come to grips with this thing, and that's part of Kubler-Ross. So it's not uncommon. There's considerations. Here's psychology at its best. And I really support this view. Some psychologists present this. There are other considerations beyond Kubler-Ross that you have to examine. And this should kind of help you understand this lady I'm speaking of. The patient's situation, including relationship support. This woman has a very supportive husband. I think this disease is harder on him than it is on her in terms of emotion. Then, of course, you have to consider the specific effects of the illness. and that's kind of given. What's going on? How bad do I feel? What do I look like? Where's my energy level, etc. Family obligations. Fortunately, this lady is retired, and okay, financially. She and her husband planned their life financially from the day they got married 45 years ago, and they did a good job of it. So there's no family obligation. She has a grown son, and he's not dealing well with this, but he will accept it. I think he's probably 40. Emotions come and go. Hope, disbelief, bewilderment, anger, and acceptance. These may be reactions in this view instead of stages. By the way, some people never reach the stage or reaction, whichever view that you want to take, of acceptance. They're angry till they breathe their last breath. Sad situation happens nonetheless. Now, there are some other there's some other theorists and theories, and I don't know if you remember John Bowlby, who did a lot of work with Mary Ainsworth, but he also worked in the area of grief. And Bowlby and Parks, you don't really have to remember these names, developed 4 phases of grief to deal with this end-of-life business and the onset of death. They proposed what they call a reformulated theory of grief, and it comes from the 1980s. It's a little different than what you've heard so far. Their work's based on Kubler-Ross model, and it really takes a portion of that and concentrates on the grief aspect of it. And here's what they say. Yeah, I think you'll find this interesting. The initial phase. They, instead of calling it denial, they call it shock and disbelief. What happens is reality becomes altered because your brain responds to a stressful situation by becoming unresponsive or numb to the new situation. Now, this is not uncommon. It happens in a lot of things, not just death. And I won't go into every one of those things. Combat's one of them. But it happens in a lot of things. And over a period of time, according to Bowlby and Parks, your mind processes the new reality, and then once it's processed, it moves to a new phase. And this phase is called by them searching and yearning. Instead of, it's somewhat related to anger. The anger and bargaining stages would be called searching and yearning, and by Bowlby and Parks. And what happens is a person attempts to undo this new reality of impending death, and they question the reason for it. Why do I have to die? Now again, you got to understand that this is not just somebody with a disease. This is somebody that old age is, they're in their twilight years, so to speak, and they know that death is going to happen. Could happen any day if you're in your 70s and beyond. And so this is some of the considerations they have. And that leads to disorganization and repair. This is like the depression stage. A person experiences the full acceptance of the new reality, and that causes them to show signs of depression. And then some become apathetic. They don't want to do anything. If you go to an old folk home, you will encounter different levels of where people are in their late stages of life. And some become apathetic. They just don't want to do anything. So this organization and repair. I don't particularly care for that terminology, but that's not for me to change. The repair is really associated with the apathy. It's how they're trying to fix their thinking. And then finally, rebuilding and healing. Hopefully this happens where the person experiences a renewed sense of identity, and that represents overcoming the sense of loss. And they begin to feel in control of their destiny. They no longer show signs of depression. They still don't, in some cases, don't fully accept the fact that they're going to die, although they know it's going to happen, but they don't really want to accept it. But they understand that they have to in the end. And this is a little more closely associated with people dealing with a disease than it is anything else. Now, here's another theory. I want you to compare all these while I'm giving them to you. Worden's 4 basic tasks in adapting to loss. Worden's model, and by the way, this word grief keeps popping up because that's what all this is about. They're grieving the fact that you're going to die. So in Worden's model, he doesn't do stages. His postulate, if you want to call it that, it's beyond that, says that a person must complete 4 tasks to complete bereavement. They don't occur in any specific order according to him. A person may work on a task intermittently until it's complete. And it applies to grief of a survivor, and it can also apply to the person. The word patient pops up a lot too. So, and some of this is more related to patient than person. So accepting reality of loss. Initially, a person may have difficulty accepting the reality of impending death. Now, let me stop there and explain something to you. There is a difference between being diagnosed with a terminal disease and not being diagnosed with anything except that you know you're very old. So that's the parallel. That's the similarity. I'm still going to die. Just nobody has predicted the length of time I have left as in a terminal disease. But I don't have a terminal disease, but I don't know what day I'll die. It could be right now. It could be years from now. I don't know. So that's kind of the thinking that puts these two together, patient/person. So usually, according to Worden, acceptance of this is viewed as being ready to move forward with the process of preparing for death, which is a healthy thing. And then his next premise, experiencing pain of grief. So first was accepting reality of loss. The next is experiencing pain of grief. And patients, people, may feel sadness, anger, confusion. This is the pain we're talking about here, not physical pain. But as they progress through this, they begin to feel somewhat normal again, and that kind of tempers this pain of grief. Adjustment to the environment. This is where a person becomes totally consumed with the impending death, and that will cause neglect in other aspects of life that are important to them. They may resume daily activities, going back to work, resuming a hobby, or whatever the case is, or they may become engaged as a spouse or parent, more so than when they were going through this reality of loss and pain of grief. So it's an adjustment. Okay, I know there's nothing I can do, so let me go back to doing what I should do, and I might even do it better. And then he mentions redirecting emotional energy. This is somewhat applicable to the survivors, but it's also applicable to those experiencing this. In the case of survivors, they redirect emotional injury to engaging in new activities. It's the best way I can put it. Get involved in new experiences. Newer theories, by the way, really use this model more than the stages now, because there's better understanding of what people are going through. So what you just heard is really the basics of the newest ideas in what people go through. It's kind of a loose discussion about how this deal works. And if you want to do further reading, you can read about Wolfelt. You can read about Niemeyer's narrative and constructivist model. You can read about some of the clinical significance of this stuff, because what we're doing in essence is trying to deal with the end of life in a healthy way. It's not always possible, but that's really the end. It's kind of a weird way to end things, I suppose, in a semester, but it's certainly what the end of life looks like. And you guys have a long way to go, I hope, before you get to this point in your life. But maybe you'll be a little bit prepared for it. Okay? All right, so I hope you enjoyed this 7-week session. And take it easy.